the last of the big bangs at Ironbridge Power Station. We go cruising with Mantovanibenni. A Sheraton Hotel checks out in Atlanta. And 20 years on, we look back at the tragic events of 9/11 and one demolition man's role in the clean-up operation. All that and more on the Weekend Wrap. What better way to kick off a new week than with a big bang? Those fine folks over at Demolition Services have been at it again, this time blasting the chimney at the former Ironbridge Power Station, where they've been working for the past few years. Standing at a massive 204 metres in height, the stack was the tallest structure in Shropshire. But not anymore. On the 13th of January 2012, the Italian cruise ship Costa Concordia ran aground, capsized and later sank in shallow waters after striking a reef off the coast of Tuscany. 32 people lost their lives in that incident. There then followed one of the largest maritime salvage operations in history. The vessel, which was longer and heavier than the Titanic, was refloated in July 2014, before being towed by a flotilla of 8 tugs to Genoa, the port from which it had been launched some 8 years earlier. Not that this is important to the story, but myself and the long-suffering Mrs. Demolition News saw the stricken vessel at Genoa when we docked during a Mediterranean cruise back in 2019. Anyway, the flotation devices used to get the vessel back to Genoa have now reached the end of their viable life, and their demolition has been charged to a Mantovanibenni SH550R Eagle Shear. Check this out. A former Sheraton Hotel just outside the Atlanta airport has met a spectacular end. The Department of Aviation imploded the 14-story structure at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport earlier this week, and we've got some great exclusive footage of that blast. You know that expression, a JFK moment, a moment so momentous that you will always recall precisely where you were when it happened. Now, I'm a little too young to recall the actual JFK moment itself, but I've had three such moments in my life. The first happened on the 31st of August 1997. I was on holiday in Portugal with my wife and my children. My kids were watching cartoons while I fixed them breakfast. Those cartoons were interrupted with a newsflash that announced the death of Princess Diana. Now, I'm not a royalist, far from it, but the outpouring of grief in Portugal that morning, and even more when we made it home, means that that day has stuck with me ever since. My last JFK moment came on the 23rd of February 2016. I was driving home down the M40 motorway when the radio announced that there had been an incident at the Jfk Power Station. Now, I visited the power station several times to see the ongoing demolition, so my attention was immediately triggered. Yet my initial thought was that there was no way this could be linked to the demolition taking place at the site. Sadly and tragically, that was precisely what had happened. And over the next 24 hours, it quickly became clear that the UK demolition industry had lost 4 of its number in tragic circumstances. However, my biggest JFK moment took place 20 years ago tomorrow. I was working from home researching a story via a journalist chat room. Someone in the online chat mentioned that a plane had crashed into the World Trade Center in New York. I flicked on the TV, expecting to see the remnants of a light aircraft jutting out of the building. Instead, there was a gaping hole in the North Tower from which smoke was now billowing. As I watched, the TV pictures showed a plane hitting a tower. And probably for the only time in my life, I did a genuine double take. How could a plane be hitting the tower when there was already smoke billowing from the building? It took several seconds for both me and the TV presenter to realize that this wasn't a replay or a second angle, but a second plane. This one hitting the South Tower. It took several moments more to realize that this wasn't an accident, but a targeted and deadly attack. It seems trite to say it now, but the world literally would never be the same again. Through a mix of confusion, concern, and I guess morbid fascination, I watched this all unfold until about 4 in the morning UK time. I watched it again all the following day and the day after that. I did no work for 4 days. Now, while I sat transfixed, unable to process what had happened and unable to offer any kind of assistance, others acted. There were the first responders, of course, the firefighters, the paramedics, and the police. They were already known as New York's finest. On the day of the attack and in the days, weeks, and months that followed, they demonstrated why. There were also countless acts of selfless heroism, and my personal favourite is the tale of Boardwalk Empire actor Steve Buscemi. Before becoming an actor, Buscemi had served as a firefighter in New York's Little Italy. On 9/11, he quietly and voluntarily rejoined his former firehouse. On September the 12th, 2001, and for several days following, Buscemi worked 12-hour shifts alongside other firefighters, digging and sifting through the rubble from the World Trade Center, looking for survivors. But there's another story, excuse me one second, there's another story of quiet, voluntary heroism. And it's a story that has its origins right here in the demolition industry. 2 days after 9/11, a demolition man called David Griffin drove some 500 miles from his home in North Carolina to New York's Ground Zero to see if he could help. The next thing he knew, his company, D.H. Griffin, was contracted to clean up the site, all 17 million square feet of it. Take a look at this film that recounts David Griffin's experience.
And so when you look at these, does it kind of bring you back to that time?
Oh, yeah, it really does.
For David Griffin Jr., looking back at photos of the rubble left behind when the Twin Towers fell on September 11th, 2001, is humbling.
This is part of one of the planes. That's a window seat. Pictures really just don't do it justice.
Griffin drove to New York on September 13th to see if he could help. It fell and went everywhere.
It went everywhere.
Yeah. The next thing he knew, his company, D.H. Griffin, which is headquartered in Greensboro, was contracted to clean up the site. 17 million square feet.
Yes.
When you looked at this, it had to be so overwhelming at first to say, where do we even begin?
It really was. The site was so big, but it was also so challenging, so dangerous. It was an honor to be there, but at the same time, it was it was the largest demolition project that has ever been done in America.
The hardest part was finding bodies in the debris, which happened several times a day.
It was kind of an emotional roller coaster, physically, mentally, spiritually. It was heart-wrenching a lot of days, and especially when you'd see the pictures along the walls of like, hey, find my daddy, or find my mom. And I mean, it would tear at your heart.
Griffin will never forget 9/11.
I think it's a day it changed my life. I think it changed America forever.
And he wants to make sure no one else forgets either.
We should never forget a lot of people paid the ultimate sacrifice, doing no different what we're doing today, just our job.
The term hero is bandied around a little too easily these days. The media will declare someone a hero for scoring a winning goal or rescuing a cat from a tree. I've taken the time to look up the true meaning of the term hero. It's defined as a person who is admired for their courage, outstanding achievements, or noble qualities. By that definition, the 9/11 first responders unquestionably qualify. Steve Buscemi and the countless others, and the countless others, and unnamed others actually, that offered help and assistance, also earn the title hero. And in my opinion, David Griffin also qualifies. They say you should never meet your heroes, but in David Griffin's case, I'd happily make an exception.